everyone, welcome back to Wonderland TCG. My name is Neko Wonderland, and with me today I have Riley
Hello.
and Bones.
Hey, what's up?
And today we are bringing you episode 4 of our Ranking of Commanders series, where we take almost every commander in the CDH format and give you our honest thoughts on them and rank them against one another in a tournament setting. So I'm not going to go through all the tiers and explain our reasoning. We've done that in the past few videos. So we're going to hop right in with the G-Man, Augustine the Fourth.
That is certainly not the intro I would expect for what is he, like a politician, an advisor?
A Grand Arbiter.
Grand Arbiter, yeah.
But an Azorius commander that makes both your blue and white spells cost 1 less each, and makes all of your opponent's spells cost 1 more. So, kind of the OG stacks commander in Azorius.
The issue with a commander like this is I don't really think he really lends himself too well to a particularly strong strategy. Like, taxing is a strong effect. There are decks that want that sort of taxation effect, playing stuff like, I play a lot of them in Winota and everything, but I don't think this commander really capitalizes on it as well from the lack of any form of draw power. You really just have to rely on what you have, and I don't really think he's that good, to be honest.
So, the problems with Bant stacks and taking away a color, they only get worse. That's why we're all pretty low on mono white stacks. Azorius stacks isn't better. There is a really funny thing you can do with Gav that someone pointed out, where if you have Helm of the Host, you can put Helm of the Host on Gav, make it impossible to play the game, and then just throw out an Oracle and put Helm of the Host on Oracle, and eventually you'll win. But that doesn't mean it's good.
No, you're probably not going to win a tournament. That's a strategy that's not going to work in a 75 to 90 minute round.
Yeah, stacks in a timed round is very difficult.
And that's the joke, right? Azorius can't win games, and that's because commanders like Goff have existed for so long. Because you really can't win the game with Goff. There's no win condition that this commander gives you. Your plan is really approach of the second sun. Like, that's what this commander does to help you win. It makes it cost a little bit less.
Don't you do Rest in Peace plus Helm or something?
Helm of Obedience.
Helm of
Obedience.
Thank
Yes.
So, you can do that, but that only kills one player at a time.
Yeah, that kind of tells you how bad the win cons are. There are way better examples of commanders you can play in Azorius, and when you look at the commanders in Azorius that are actually, pretty decent, you look at something like Shorikai, you look at something like Tamashi. What do you notice, other than the fact that they're both from Kamigawa? They both give you card advantage, and that is something that when you're playing this sort of slower controlling strategy that Azorius really wants to do, that's what you really need in the command zone. You need some form of long-term draw power that can back up your more patient counterspell plus disruption stacks focused game plan. The tax effect just isn't enough.
A really strong effect, but once it hits the board and the effect is there, you're not really benefiting yourself much, just hindering your opponents. And that's not a strategy that wins you the game, because eventually someone is going to be able to fight out from under that. So I think it's pretty safe to say this is an F tier commander. I know there have been decks in it for it in the past, but in the current metagame, I don't see it doing very well. I would even put it below Estrid, I think.
Astrid and Arbiter feel sort of similar in where you're playing that sort of disruptive, control-y, stacksy thing. The only difference is that Astrid eventually, Mega Cope, you're not actually doing this, but has that ultimate to go towards that actually gives you some form of advantage on the board. But Grand Arbiter really doesn't have anything to work towards, any sort of board advantage.
Yeah.
Even worse than Outlaw, if we're being completely honest, as much as I don't like to say that. But moving on to another 2-color commander, the meme himself, Greasefang. The idea of the deck is you're a stacks deck that just wants to cheat out Parhelion and just win the game through beats with 4/4 angels.
I cannot say I've ever seen her in an opposing command zone, but why? It's just like it's not a good sign that we have a far better Orzhov stacks commander or commanders, excuse me, in F tier. Timna Armix is removal and card draw in the command zone. Greasefang is a combo that doesn't win the game in the command zone, but also it's not even a combo because you need to entomb something. So it's like a one card that doesn't win the game, and then you also have to rely on stacks you draw because you can't draw cards with this. Why?
Yeah, I agree with that. I wouldn't play this in CDH. I'd only play it in casual, if that.
Yeah, you're win conless stacks, right? There's no combo here. There's a cute synergy that can catch opponents off guard sometimes. It will win you a game every once in a while, but with no real consistency. So where do we want to put it? F tier for sure. Where in F are we feeling?
I'd feel very comfortable saying bottom.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's Greasefang. It's a meme deck that doesn't see much play anymore. On to our next commander then. We have Savala, Heart of the Wild. This is the mono-green version of Savala that benefits you from having big creatures that let you draw cards and make a lot of mana. I think this is a really strong deck. I think it has both mana and card advantage in the command zone. It has a lot of infinite potential in its colors. I think at least a C.
So I used to play a lot of Savala. The idea with Savala is to play a very efficient creature with a lot of stats. So something like Phyrexian Dreadnought. You have Savala ready to activate. You play your Dreadnought in response to the sacrifice trigger. You activate Savala, make 12 mana. And then you can then go and do stuff like Return of the Wild Speaker to draw 12 cards and then just go off. And it's mono green storm. I think it's a really, really fun deck. However, it's not the greatest because if you have like an opening hand of Chromux, Ancient Tomb, Jeweled Lotus, whatever, to get Saval out, and then 3 like Phyrexian Dreadnought, Phyrexian Soul Gorger, or whatever that snow one is, or like Lupine Prototype. It's rough on the mulligans because if you have a lot of acceleration pieces, the acceleration pieces don't feed into themselves.
I mean, you are playing some weird cards in this deck for sure. Luckily, you are in just the mono green strategy, so you have a lot of wiggle room in what you can build.
Like mono green is definitely going to struggle when it comes to CDH. Like obviously your options on what you run in this color makes you run a lot of like maybe weird underpowered cards that you'd normally not want to be running. To me though, this is sort of one of those commanders that has like real like legacy status. And I think she still does hold up a bit. I think the deck can do some very explosive things. I think you're not as strong as maybe some other monocolored decks. Green is one of the less powerful things you can be doing monocolor wise, but like of the green commanders, this is like one of the best ones. You have a really solid game plan. You can make so much mana really quickly. The fact that Savala has to live and untap is kind of scary.
I think she can still compete. I think that, yes, you're reliant on your commander for everything that you're trying to do, and if you don't have Savala, that's going to hurt you. But one thing I think people forget with this deck is actually pretty fast. Like, this deck can win turn 3 out of nowhere almost.
That is pretty cool. I think if I had to rank her, I'd put her like bottom of C.
I was looking at the list and I would feel comfortable probably putting her under Captain Cedh.
I'm very happy with that placement.
Yeah, that's fair.
On to another Rakdos commander then. This one, kind of an oldie. We have Grenzo.
Renzo, when I started playing CDH, was like the original fast deck goes fast. A lot of players used Doomsday,
Mm-hmm.
where you exile your graveyard and your library. You pick 5 of the cards, put them in your library in any order you want. And then you make a doomsday pile that feeds into itself, and you win the game through like murderous red cap loops or something. I have good opinions of it. I like the deck.
Rakdos is actually pretty good, in my opinion. You can just do, typical Rakdos stuff, but you also do have the Doomsday win con that is very, solid with your commander. I'd be fine rating this one in the, I think maybe around, also a C, but that's just me.
Interesting. I think that Grenzo is cool. I think Rakdos are strong colors. I don't think this commander is as good as Florian, and we have Florian in D. So I'm kind of looking at this one probably right under Bergie, in my opinion.
I am very surprised by that. I was actually gonna say in between Ikra Dargo and Elsha.
You think that highly of it, huh?
That's funny because I'm sort of happy medium. I was gonna say something like right in between Sisay and Abaddon.
So we're kind of all over the place with this one. This is kind of the first one we're disagreeing on tonight. So what I like about this commander is good colors, unique strategy, can win you the game, but it's an older commander that struggles right now, I think. I think that strategy that it did have isn't really working for it anymore, and it's kind of been power crept out of the format.
I mean, the thing is, you can also just run a lot of the newer stuff as well, right? I mean, what's stopping you from running Nas or Breach or anything? You can just be, this is my Rakdos stack that also can just doomsday you.
One of the things that I actually really like about Grenzo is most people are like, oh yeah, if I have like a Rest in Peace or a Dothy Voidwalker, it'll stop the deck. No, it doesn't. Because of the way Grenzo ability is worded, you put the card to graveyard and then you immediately pull it back out. And so a replacement effect like Rest in Peace, it tries to exile the card after it's already out, or something like that.
That's a cool interaction for sure. I still don't think that's enough to save it, in my opinion, but I at least can respect what this card is doing. So, just taking everyone's feedback into mind, I'm okay then, I think, putting it on the higher end of D, kind of above Florian.
Sure.
I would be fine if it's the top of D tier.
Top of D? Okay. It does have to beat out a 4-color deck for that spot, but again, I don't think that 4-color deck is a very good strategy overall anyway, so top of D is fine.
Yeah, that 4-color deck can't run stuff like Spellseeker, so I don't think it really counts.
At least in the version we're looking at. Remember, we're looking at those paired with Luris.
I don't know. I think that deck might not be getting enough credit here. I think it's actually pretty decent, but
You know what? Yeah, I agree, kind of. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that one, I think, top of, or bottom of C, and keep Grenzo top of D. But we are going to move on to our next commander, Christ, another Planeswalker commander that interacts a bit uniquely. Unlike other Planeswalker commanders that specifically say it can be your commander, Grist is just treated as a creature in the command zone. Anywhere that it's not on field, it's just a creature. So this is a kind of graveyard strategy commander, which has a sack outlet in its abilities, which means it's most likely seen as a Protean Hulk deck. It's a strong strategy for these colors for sure, and having that sack outlet in the command zone is nice. Plus, you have built-in creature removal. You can fill your graveyard if you want to do like a reanimator package. It also pseudo protects itself because you do make like insects when you mill.
so the way things like fierce, things like force of negation, things like Dovin's Vita are worded is they say specifically non-creature, and because Grist is a creature on the stack, that means that you cannot target it with those spells.
Yeah, so my opinion just went way up.
Looking at Golgari decks, Grist is pretty good. Every single top deck tutor, we're talking Sylvan, we're talking Worldly, we're talking Impseal, we're talking Vamp, all just become Entombs. That's, I believe, what the database version was looking like. It was like Grist with like a bunch of Entombs. And the cool thing about that is you can really focus your deck around reanimation. You can run, I believe I've seen Razaketh variants. I've seen you mentioned Protean Hulk.
When I see Grist, I think of Adnaz for some reason.
Well, yeah, you just also get to run Adnaz. When you're Grist, you are just running all the best things you could be running in green black. And then you also just get to run all these other cards that sort of just win you the game. I mean, obviously, it can be a bit awkward sometimes. Like, if you plus Grist, you can also, like, reanimate and then minus Grist to sack Protean Hulk or something like that. But think about it like this. This is kind of why I like the Razaketh version, personally. What you do is you can plus Grist, bin your Razaketh, and then you already have a creature on board to sacrifice to Razaketh in the 1/1 insect token. And you've been plussing Grist, you can be having a bunch of tokens on the battlefield that are now Razaketh fodder, so it's really easy to just win that way. So I don't know. I'm a fan of Bug Friend, and not just because the art is a skeleton.
Yo, I just realized something. You can cast Grist with food chain mana.
The only awkward thing with that is you can't sacrifice Grist to food chain. So that's why you don't really see like food chain variants of this commander.
So with Grist and food chain, you can because Eternal Scourge is only from exile. Never mind.
I think you're a little bit lost in the sauce there.
Way off track.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a strong commander. Looking at the other color pairings, I don't like it as much as Gitrock, but I do like it a bit more than Dina, I think.
See, personally, I like this one more than Frog, but Frog players going to hate me, so I apologize. I love Frog. I think he's awesome. I love him, but I like Grist. I like the Bug Man.
Yeah, I just got busy getting lost in the sauce, and so I'm like, oh yeah, like up by Carmella, right? And then you're like, not as much as Gitrog. I'm like, oh right, I forgot I need to be realistic.
Well, if you don't like it as much as Frog, I would argue maybe putting it directly below Frog, but I actually like it more than Frog, so I would put it like a few spaces above, but that's just me.
I really like Grist. I didn't actually think about the card until now, but Grist is really cool. So I would probably put it in between Godo and Arkham.
People are feeling a bit more hot on this one than I am. Okay.
Weird trend for today's video. Usually I'm the one who's like F tier, but
I'll put it right above Frog then. A good compromise.
I hope even if the Frog players hate me, the Bug players like me. I hope.
And the more I look at this tier list, the more I recognize we definitely have to change a couple things. But we're going to do that in a later episode, just to remind everyone. So be patient with us. We are forming our opinions as we go. That's why we're taking time to discuss everything. Now on to a commander, which I don't think there will be much debate about how good it is. Or should I say commanders? Malcolm Vile Smasher.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the benefits of Grixis. Have we talked about the benefits of Malcolm? Yeah, because we talked about Maltimna.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were talking about Maltimna, I'm sure we mentioned that one of the sad things about that deck is you cannot be running Glinthorn. Well, here is a deck that can be running Glinthorn. This is Grixis, Malcolm, you just get to run all the Grixis good stuff, but you also just get an additional one card with your commander, and you get good mana generation. The only downside to this, and this is why I actually don't like this deck as much as something like Timna Malcolm, is you give up the really, really good card advantage in the command zone for essentially a commander that does not have a text box. Forgive me, curious control players. Um, but Vial Smasher is not really relevant in this deck. You really just want to be like doing Malcolm stuff. And I mean, obviously, like we already know that not having card draw in the command zone isn't like a complete it's not that bad for Grixis. Like we'll get to Roxai eventually, but there's like that deck doesn't have the card advantage in the command zone, and it still manages to be really, really strong. But the difference between Malcolm Vial Smasher and Rogue Silas is speed. This deck is slower than that deck. You have the one card to make up for it. I don't think it's a good enough reason to be running this over that. But all in all, you're playing Grixis. You have a one card. You have good commander. Yeah, good commander singular.
And you mentioned the go fast strategy, and this deck actually doesn't really want to do that too much, to the point where there are some versions of this list that aren't even on the ad nause plan. This is a deck that likes to be a bit more mid-rangey, likes to incur some of that value that Malcolm allows you to get, while giving you some alternate win conditions that are really strong besides your one card. Of course, the Thassa's Oracle package, Doomsday is also an option I've seen before.
So I've been quiet trying to think of a reason not to put it in B tier, just because I don't want to have 3 Grixis decks in a row right there. But I am not finding any good reasons.
You're thinking B. That's interesting. I'm actually thinking low A.
My biggest issue is I like all the decks in A more than it, but I also like all the decks in B less than it. So, I mean, I guess assuming that we're going to be putting a decent amount more commanders in A, I'd probably put it near the bottom of that tier. So, I mean, just putting it bottom of A right now and then putting some stuff above it later would make more sense to me.
I mean, Malcolm is strong, right? Malcolm's a really strong commander, and giving you the consistency that Black offers in order to get your combo piece can't be overlooked, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think bottom of A tier would be fine.
We move on to our next commander, another frog, Grolnok, the Omnivore.
I'll say right off the bat, it's my least favorite of the two frogs. You do have some, you have your whatever ways to mill the library with Girl Knockout and play your Thassa's Oracle, but I don't know. This is a weird one. I don't know how I feel about this deck.
Doesn't this one mostly just run Hermit Druid?
I think it also can run Horseman, just like Basalt's Mesmeric Orb. I don't know if it does. I think it does.
It can run all those things, yeah, pretty well, because it has that unique strategy, right? It lets you recur things that you put into the bin, permanents at least, so you can have those infinite strategies and then be able to use those to win the game. But it's fragile. You are relying on your commander. You need a lot of pieces to kind of set it up, so it takes you a couple turns to really get there. And it's pretty obvious to what you're doing. If nothing else, though, it is a viable win line in, I think, a strong 2-color combination. I wouldn't rank it very highly. I would say this is probably another D commander.
I think D is fine. Like, I really like that you have Traumatize and Cut Your Losses as sort of like your blue peer into the abysses, but getting blown out by like Draneth and everything and being very fragile, I don't know, it's got its downsides.
I feel like it's really fragile. It doesn't have that many ways to remove problematic pieces. And if you are going with something like Traumatize, or if you're going for Basalt Monolith Mesmeric Orb or Hermit Druid, having your commander removed in response to that kind of stops you dead in your tracks. And so I'm not very high on it. I think maybe in between Amanatu and Azami.
I can agree with that. Bones, are you good with that placement?
Yeah, I don't know. It does have some cute stuff. Maybe I'm being too harsh. Like I'm looking at the list and I kind of like what it's got going on. Yeah, I'm not seeing the basalt thing. It does have cephalid illusionist and lightning greaves. I do like that lightning greaves sort of doubles as a combo piece and protection for girl knock because you need girl knock out, you need the protection. I would say I'm worried about it being slow, but I mean you have the counter spells, you have the massive amount of draw with the only downside being you do need to play a lot of permanents, which isn't bad. Yeah. I mean, I think D is probably around where I'd put it. This is one of those strategies that I feel is like fine, but it's not incredible.
It's a deck that on paper looks a lot better than it is, and from what I understand, when people actually try to play it, they're kind of disappointed with the actual results. Because you look at it, right? You read the commander, it does a pretty strong, unique thing that can easily win you the game. In practice, it's a fragile, clunky package that doesn't get you there as often as you want it to.
I also really don't like how absolutely stone cold this deck is to Dranith Magistrate.
Speaking of decks that are hurt by Dranith, though, we have the goodest of boys, Paco Halden, a partner with Commander. It can steal your opponent's goodies and let you use them to your advantage, as well as putting intense pressure on your opponent's life totals with Paco.
Is Paco still on the extra turns plan?
It doesn't run a ton of them, but it does run enough to do what it wants to do. Oddly enough, it's actually on more of a Neoform package now.
Really?
The idea is that you can use Paco in the early game to kind of incur that value, and then later use Neoform to get another value piece, often something I think like Consecrated Sphinx.
Teamer has issues, right? I'll just say that right now. I think Teamer has some issues when it comes to this format. And I don't actually think Halden Paco is amazing at solving those issues. You just have a huge target for removal. You need to resolve both of your commanders to start getting value, which is what, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mana just to start getting value. I mean, obviously you start getting the value and then you could play Halton later and pick it up, but it's like, I don't know. You're also weak to stacks. You're playing like clunky big spells. I'm not a fan personally.
To your point where the colors are a bit weird in Teamer, I do agree, but at least in this case, you have the option to better that situation by potentially stealing some of your opponent's best spells. Things like Demonic Tutor, extra counter spells, even win cons, like stealing an extra Thoracle isn't the worst thing you could do.
I used to play with someone who played Paco Halden a lot, but this was a couple years ago. And I remember it being a really good deck, and it was fairly impressive. But I'm trying to think if it's possible that it fell off in the past year or so. I have fond memories of the deck, but I would probably put it underneath the food chain 5-color decks.
I do think it still has legs, but especially now where there's a much more creature heavy meta, that also comes with extra creature removal. So by just the circumstances, it's going to be easier to remove the doggo and kind of shut you off there.
It's kind of funny because as much as I don't like this deck, I'm looking at this tier list and I still think I would put it above Animar. Like, I like what they do more than I like what Animar does. But I guess my thought is, would this be better than Brawl and Shabazz?
I think yes, personally, but
I think it's like, I could go either way. But I definitely think this commander, I like it more than Animar's game plan. I think at least this one, you do have a lot of advantage by taking your opponent's spells. I mean, the issue there is that it's random. So it's going to depend entirely on what your opponents have.
so Riley's kind of mid D, I'm top of D, and Bones is kind of in the middle there. So I think we can say that it's towards the top above Animar. I think that's a good placement for it right now. For our second Golgari commander of the evening, though, Hapatra, a unique commander that benefits from -1/-1 counters. It has a combo with Yawgmoth, where you can just infinitely get -1/-1 counters, draw a bunch of cards, and just go from there. And has your other standard Golgari win con options. That said, I don't really love this commander. It's kind of niche and requires a lot to get its strategy going.
See, I remember Hapatra being like old blood CDH, but I don't remember seeing it since Yawgmoth came out. So I'm not very high on it. I think it's one of the decks that kind of fell to the wayside just because it is really niche and there's not the player base to support it.
I think if I had to try and answer as to why it might have fallen to the wayside, I feel like the issue with Hapatra is you look at all of the other options in Golgari. Like we talked about Grist, we touched on Frog again, and we even mentioned Dina. And to be honest, I like all those commanders more. I'm looking at the deck, and it's another Hulk deck, and it's a Hulk deck that doesn't have that outlet in the command zone. Like Kapatra is not a sacrifice outlet. Dina is an outlet that also has a one card win condition. Even we haven't even gotten to Varolz yet, but Varolz at least gives you sacrifice in the command zone, even if he costs more mana. I mean, the Yawgmoth combo is cute, sure, but like, I guess having that sort of quote unquote one card with Yawgmoth, just turning him into a Yawgmoth's will, is sort of the saving grace of this deck. It's like the question is this deck better than Dina? And I don't feel like the answer is yes.
I love that you're looking at the other, commanders and the colors and being comparing them that way. I'm over here looking at it and I'm like, I'd honestly rather play Edric over Hapatra. We all
Yeesh.
know what we all know what my opinion on Edric is.
Fair.
I don't think this deck is gonna put up results anytime soon.
Green has the benefit of being very, very, very good at being able to find creatures. And so I would sort of treat this as a deck that has that one card with Yawgmoth. I would probably be playing Kapatra in a way that my game plan is just to get Yawgmoth out as soon as possible and sort of go from there, draw a lot of cards, try and win from there. I mean, I don't know, Nas is a little bit awkward because the way the combo works, you're just sort of draining your life total. But something like a Peer into the Abyss, something like, assembling Wither Smog, even Yawgmoth is a sacrifice out there for Hulk. I still don't know if that's worth giving up the sack outlet in the command zone, letting you be a more dedicated Hulk deck, and giving up the additional one card in, what is it, Exquisite Blood? That Dina has. Like I said, I'm evaluating this commander in comparison to Dina as another like 2 mana Golgari Turbo E commander. I mean, the more I'm thinking about this one, the more I'm kind of looking on it a bit favorably. I would still put her somewhere in D. I'm just racking my brain trying to figure out exactly where in D tier I would put this commander, depending on build, I guess.
I think the commander is cool. I think it can win. I think that it's scary and it's a commander that a lot of people will underestimate. And all of a sudden you have Yawgmoth on field and they're scrambling because they don't have an answer and they're just dying. I would probably go again in the middle between what you both are saying. I think I would put it around where Anya is. I think they have kind of similar weird strategies. I do think the colors that Hapatra offers, like you said, Bones, is better for the strategy, but it's not the best strategy still. It can still win you games, and again, most of these commanders will be able to win you games, but in terms of tournament placement results, I don't see it getting you very far. Again, if for no other reason, then again, creature removal is just really prevalent right now. But yeah, there I think is good. And we can move on to our last commander for today. We have Hoffrey Ghostforge. It's Boros, and it's not Winota, so already it struggles quite a bit.
You said Hoffrey Ghostforge, and the first word that came to my mind is who? Look, I know we've been saying now that Boros has gotten tools. Boros has, it's not as bad as it used to be. A lot of people used to say Boros was really, really weak, and now we're seeing really handsome and smart and humble players pick up Winota. But Hoffrey is a 5 mana. I don't know. I'm really feeling the who, what, when, where, why. Looking at this card.
I'll agree. I don't think I've actually ever seen this commander played personally, but when I was making this tier list, I did actually see a fair amount of lists, at least enough to warrant me including it. That said, I did have to look up what the commander actually does, and it's interesting, but I don't think it does too much for you. I don't see much reason to play this one.
Why are we playing 3-card combos with our 5 mana commander?
Yeah,
Let's put this
I'm
below
a
Grease
bottom
Fang.
left here.
Mhm. So, the way this commander works, the combo that it uses are things like Karmic Guide and Revelark, plus a sack outlet.
See, but that's still a 3-card combo.
It is. It's a weird 3-card combo, and it requires a lot of setup. I'm not a huge fan of it.
So you're playing 3-card combos in colors that can't tutor for them with a 5 mana commander in a 2-color deck.
And it also can't ramp. For being very generous and saying outlet is free. That's still 15 mana, at least.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but I apologize to Adeline.
Anticlimactic as it might be, I do think it at least deserves the bottom of F spot right now. Grease Fang, surprisingly not ending at the bottom of the tier list this episode. Go figure.
Grease Fang is... something's off when Grease Fang is not the worst commander. She narrowly escaped bottom F.
Very much so.
Wow. I'm
One
sorry,
Grease
Grease Fang.
player is like, yeah, we're gaming.
All right, everyone. But thank you so much for joining us. Please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of our tier list series. Thank you so much to Bones and Riley for joining me, and hope you have a good rest of your day.
Subscribe or I'll trap you in a karmic guide loop.